never, never, never can forget that day when you called me baby. How long, how long?
All right, hello everyone. My name is Andrew Wilkins. I'm the publisher and editor of Village Portland, and we're here at KBOO Studios doing some long-form interviews about history, about Montavilla history. I got into this whole thing to encourage people to tell stories, encourage people to get involved, and one of the interesting things I've learned from Pat Sanders' awesome Montavilla Memory articles is how much people had to do it themselves back in the day. It was all about organizing. People got together themselves and made projects happen, sometimes encouraging the city to do things, but a lot of times it was on their own. So we're going to have a conversation today about Montavilla history. Pat?
Hi Andrew, I'm Pat Sanders, and I moved to Montavilla in 2013, and I moved into a 1920 bungalow and got really interested in my house because I really like old houses. And then I got interested in Montavilla history. I wanted to know more about the community I was living in. So I started doing research and eventually met up with Andrew, and that gave me an opportunity to actually put some of my research into written form and share it with the community.
Sounds good.
Okay, and I would like to introduce Dianne Dixon-Lawrence, who I'm interviewing today. She's lived in Montavilla a long time, and her family goes way, way back, so she has a lot of really interesting memories. She's the third generation person to run the Dickson Drugs Co, which used to be located on Stark Street at the corner of 80th and Stark, right where the Country Cat restaurant is now. Dianne, welcome, and thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to hearing some of your stories. I know that you got a lot of them. I want to talk to you about the Dickson Drugs Co, but also a little bit about the Kiwanis Club, and I should say that Dianne is wearing her Montavilla Kiwanis Club t-shirt today. So she's president of the Kiwanis Club in Montavilla and has been for some time, and has been active for a long, long time in the Montavilla Kiwanis Club. So what I thought would be interesting to talk to you about is just a little bit of your background. Were you born in Montavilla or near Montavilla?
I was born at Portland Sanitarium, which is a building still on 69th and Belmont.
Uh-huh.
It's known as Marquis Care Center, but that's the building, yes.
Okay, great, thank you. And let's see. Oh, okay, so maybe just running a little bit through your background, and then we'll talk about the drugstore and the history of the drugstore. I think you went to Vestal's school when you were in elementary school.
That's correct.
And do you have any interesting memories about that?
I do. I remember it taking home ec, and all of the tea towels were monogrammed with an M for Montavilla Grade School that my father went to before that. So Vestal School opened, I believe, in 1930-something, and I would have to look that date up. But they remembered the students walking, carrying all their books and supplies in it behind a flag and a drum person to drummer. I knew that. Walking up to Vestal School, carrying their stuff in the Montavilla School, which is on 76th and
I think it's
Ash,
between
I think,
Ash.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And they walked up. They all forgot which way they went for sure. They all had different memories of that, different memories of the weather, but they all agreed that it was the most important day. It was a very important day for them to change from the Montavilla School to the Vestal School. A lot of laughter. It was a lot of fun. That little walk, yes.
Very interesting. And then for high school, where did you go?
I went to Washington High School. I think they had a high school class at Montavilla for a while, and my dad may have gone to that for his freshman year, but he went to Washington High School also. Mm-hmm. And so I was the only one that did the schools that my dad did.
Washington High School is quite a far distance from Montavilla. How would you get there?
Bus, the Mount Tabor bus. My dad went on the streetcar that went right by Washington High School. And I will just say that at a church function that somebody saw my name tag of Dianne Dixon-Lawrence, said, "Are you any relationship to Bill Dixon?" I said, "That was my father." And she said, "You know, he used to get on the the streetcar about 90th and Yam Hill. All of us that lived farther west wanted to get on the bus because he would always sit towards the back, and he was just so handsome, and we all hoped that we could ride to Washington High School with him. Okay. But no, I went by bus, Mount Tabor bus.
And when you were young, do you remember going to the drugstore? Do you have any early memories about Dickson Drug Store?
Yes. A lot. We lived down on 80th and Taylor. We would walk up to the drugstore. My mother would bring my dad maybe something to eat, and we would walk home together. It was just a local thing. See my grandparents there. We didn't have a car until after World War II, so I was 7 or so when that happened, and that was just nice. It was just nice to walk up. I remember that of just seeing people. And in the days before freezers and things, you went grocery shopping almost every day because you had no way of, preserving lots of food. So go in the baby buggy with my younger brother, Barnaby, and we go back home. I remember going with Mark too a little bit. Yeah, we had a car then more when he was born. But
So Mark was your other brother?
yeah, he was younger,
Uh-huh.
and it was so. I look back at my life and things that without the conveniences, but I look back at it as a very happy, blessed life because of community. I have to just say, everybody knew my parents from one of the corner drugstores in Montavilla. There was Sears and Gleason. Sears just up the street from us, and Fowler's on Gleason. And there was one other whose name I can't remember right now, but he was a member of Kiwanis too. I remember that. And so that's my earliest memories of going to the drugstore. And then later on, when we got old enough to go to movies, my folks figured out it was, and my mother was working more at the drugstore. There'd been health issues, and it was cheaper to send us to the Academy Theater by the time it had opened, to go up to see the matinees, which were, 2 features. You have first, and then usually a cowboy movie or something, and then a second, and the newsreels, and lots of cartoons and other little things. So it was a long day for 25 cents.
Yes.
And we would go up there and do that. I loved the movies, so that was, for me, a very good thing, yeah.
And that was close by.
That was across the street. Yeah, and up across Stark and up the street.
Yeah.
And I remember going into the Academy Theater when it was just before it opened. My mom and dad and I were walking home for something. I don't know why, it was just the 3 of us. We ran into the people that were running the Academy, and they gave us a special tour and showed us the cry room. And I thought the beautiful, beautiful sparkly curtain that went across the screen, and I'm on the radio talking with my hands. I'm sorry. But it was lovely, and just seeing all of it before it opened was so pristine. It was I just remember that as a magic time. And then going to the movies all the time. That was fun. And I love what they've done with it now, making it into smaller theaters, and have little tiny pictures of my friends, when we were in school.
Right, the old pictures they have on the walls.
And I remember the lines around from the drugstore going around the block, and then at Christmas time you could bring food to donate for I'm not sure who did that thing, but lots of people, kids lined up around the block with cans of stuff or loaves of bread or whatever they were donating to the this drive at Christmas time. So that was very, very nice.
So if we can go back to 1910, when your grandfather, before you were alive, when your grandfather started the drugstore, I'd like to talk a little bit about that. His name was Leland Dixon, right?
Yes, Leland Voigt Dixon, referred to in the community as LV.
LV.
Yes, and he went to work. He was apprenticed as a pharmacist in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and came out here. Had health issues with the steel mills and asthma and various things, and they told him to go to a high drive climate, and he ended up in Denver, well known high and dry, and my great grandmother and great aunt joined him. His father said, "I can't. There's no in Denver. There's no shipbuilding. I'm a shipbuilder." So he checked out San Francisco, Portland, and was going to check out Seattle, but he liked Portland, so he sent for the family. And my great grandmother and my great aunt stopped in Denver, saw LV, and my great aunt said it was like death warmed over. He was so sick, and my great grandmother said, "Well, come with us to Portland, so we can take care of you." That's also well known high and dry Portland, Oregon. And he says, "I can't. I owe money." She says, "We've just sold everything back in Pennsylvania, so we've got money to pay your things and a ticket." And they got to Portland, and he had a job. First, they found where my grandfather was staying in a boarding house that he rented for himself and for his daughter and his wife. And then they end up with the son too. And the landlady said, "No, you can't stay here because that wasn't in the contract." And I don't know, that could not have been just rude, but it always felt rude to me. And so they found another place, and he would walk down to the docks, down to the Willamette River, about 7th and maybe Cooch, although I've forgotten the exact part of that, but I remember 7th. And one day he's going out to work, and there's a guy across the street and says, Mr. Dixon, could you come here a minute?" And he came over and he said, "I've been watching you. You seem like a really nice family there, but I want to tell you that this place that you're living," and these are the words of my great aunt. My grandfather loved to tell me stories. My grandfather never told me this one. But he said it was a house. A house. It was a house of ill repute. And so she remembers them all going up and getting their luggage and walking down 7th Avenue so they could find another boarding house. Stay there. So that was their introduction to Portland. And then I think from there, my grandmother went to the Second Baptist Church, which now I've forgotten the name. It's over by Hawthorne. And they were looking out, and my grandfather saw this woman walking by. And she says, "Oh, that's Viola Fleming." She goes to the church, and he says, "That's who I'm going to marry." And that's who he did marry, and that was my grandmother. And then he worked for a pharmaceutical firm that delivered medicines and herbs and the things, and it would go by train around the Northwest. And he came to work on the day after Christmas in 1909, and that building had burned to the ground.
This is in Montavilla?
No, this is again back in that area, and I would have to. I've got janky drugs. I have some bottles from it that people gave me, but and then his father loaned him maybe as much as I've seen the check. $500 or to get started from a Mr. Schaufelberger who had a drugstore on the corner of 80th and Stark and was going to move someplace else. And he said it was a good business because it would bring in about $10 a day. And so he opened it up and worked there and made homemade ice cream to help to serve after the movies were over. People would walk down and get ice cream at the drugstore. And went to work on July 5th, 1910, and that block had all burned to the ground. And my aunt always admired his courage for being burned out of business twice within 6 months and opening up again. So the building that he set up business in was across Stark Street. It's not there now. And
that was after the fire.
After
the 1910 fire.
Right. Yeah, this was the other building. There was another fire in like 2004. I'd have to look that up. Montavilla Department Store was what it was called. And then he rented, this picture that you have is in that bar next door. He started there with his drugstore business, and then
You mean it used to be a bar, right?
No, at this
No.
point it's a drugstore. Yeah, you can
Right.
see all the
Right.
all the
You can see the
sundries
soda
and things.
fountain
Yeah,
and all the
right.
shelves with the drugs.
Yeah,
And
and
your
then
grandfather's standing there.
yeah, and so then he moved in. He rented from Mr. Lewis, and then as time went by, they became partners in the property, and then my dad and grandfather bought the whole property. But it was a long process of developing the business and being part of it, but always part of the community. My grandfather was a Mason and helped start a Masonic lodge in Montavilla. Then my father in 1929 was part of, no, he wasn't. He was still in college. He just finished, and he got out and went to China and came back. And by this time they had started a Kiwanis club in Montavilla. And as a young professional man, who had connections with Montavilla, so he got involved in Kiwanis, and they built a camp on Mount Hood for poor children. It was during the Depression. And Mr. Gingelbach was the instigator then. He had a auto body store just across the street, across from Flying Pie. God, don't talk with your hands, sorry. Any disturbance is me thinking that if I draw pictures with my hands, it'll be better on the radio. They started this camp for kids, and now it's a camp for campers with multiple disabilities. It's
Right.
a very, very good thing, and it's a very good organization that's doing things for service for children. And so that's pretty much the very early rounds, yeah.
Yes. So when I'm curious to know if when you were maybe a teenager, did you work in the drugstore?
Yes, I worked at the fountain,
Uh-huh.
and
So that was a soda fountain, right?
it was a soda fountain, yeah.
You had Cokes and ice cream.
And yeah, all handmade, all, in fact, just before at one point I remember getting those machines that you could pull and they would give you the right measurement of Coke syrup and carbonated water, whereas before that you'd push the Coke button and put in the carbonated water and stir it up and give it with some icing, give it to a customer. And they were a nickel. You could get a nickel Coke and a nickel ice cream cone. And milkshakes were 25 cents. Or 20 cents, actually. I think Sundays were 25 cents. And to this day, I can't go to work in a fountain because I can't believe the prices, how much it costs to get a milkshake. Or, it's a special at McDonald's to get a Coke for $1. But the servings are so much bigger. I blame these servings and these economies on our weight and our gaining of stuff. We'd had just eat more.
Right, yeah, true. Now, in my family history, I have a pharmacist who also owned his own drugstore, and I know that people who in that profession did a lot to help the communities. And you've talked some about that, but also in terms of medical things, and maybe helping them understand their medications or helping in emergencies. Do you have any stories about that?
I frequently thought my father should have been a teacher. Because I would watch him, and then my brother was that way too, Barnaby. That they would explain how to take medicine and the importance of some things you take with lots of water so it gets in your system faster, and others if it says take just a sip, that's all you did, and they were very good. That was a very cool thing. I was raised on stories of the reason I come into Dickson Drug is because your father or / grandfather came down and opened up when my kid or spouse or someone in my family was very, very ill, and they came down and opened up and gave me the stuff the doctor told me to get. And so that community service and that taking care of the neighborhood was just instilled in me. And people don't go into drugstores because they want to buy medicine. They go in there because they're not feeling well. And there was no chance for any prepubescent or adolescent trauma in my life because I spent so much time at the drugstore. And occasionally I would be reminded by my mother, you just be nice to them. You smile. And that's not a bad way of living your life.
Good advice.
Yeah.
And your mother worked there too.
My mother did. She worked at Dr. Poach's office, which is in that same building that was at the drugstore that my grandfather set up, a little pharmacy across the street during the war as a nurse, assistant, probably a practicalist. My mother's very bright, and I'm sure he was very happy. And then her mother came in and worked and kept the books and did the things that you had to sterilize things. There were no disposable needles, so you sterilized everything and sterilized every day. You started out by putting him in a little thing called a sterilizer, and heat would kill the germs. You reused needles because they didn't have the disposable ones. I'm sure that's why shots used to hurt more than they do now. And but she would work up there. And there was a dentist up there, and then later a dance school across the street upstairs. And that was, my mother would work in the drugstore, and she was the one that remembered all the things that people needed. They say, well, Barbara knows. Whether, did you want ferrous iron, or not ferrous sulfate or ferrous glutamate? And I would ask, and they say, oh, I don't know, but your mother would know. So I'd call my mother and say, so-and-so is here. They say, you know what kind of iron tablets they need. It was very unique growing up in terms of just the contact with people and being expected to help them, to be of service to folks.
So you met a lot of people and knew a lot of people in Montavilla. Does anyone stand out? Is there some interesting people?
Mr. Men is somebody who was talked about a lot, and he had a barn and two not really snow white horses, but two white horses, and he would go out. I remember seeing him through some houses in our first house and take his horses and distribute farm products. There were orchards, and people had cows that they would milk, and he would take with these two white horses and just a fixture, lived in his barn and rented his house out. And
do you know where that was in Montavilla?
Yes, on 76th and Stark. 76th on the southwest corner. I think one of the buildings the barn is gone, but those were stories that folks shared, and Cy Gengelbach did the auto body shop. It's a I think it does a little auto body and upholstery on just across the street from Flying Pie Pizza. And he remembered moving into. He's not really a real old timer of Montavilla, actually, because we were not old timers. Right. There were lots of people that had been there longer, but he remembered a Civil War veteran who would blow his bugle every night, blow taps every night, and I never heard that, but that was. I never heard the taps. I heard that story from different people, and but it just seems like that texture, family, and community is cool.
It is, and I've heard. I don't know if this is the same Mr. Mann or not, but a couple of other people have told me about someone with that same last name who had a horse and wagon, and he would take children to do berry picking. He'd take them to the berry fields. I think maybe out in Russellville.
That could be, yeah. That was all, between Portland and Gresham was just about all berry fields.
Right.
Yeah, and then right Oh, I'd have to look at the, oof, 76th on facing Stark was the blacksmith shop, and on the southeast corner, and he would be really good, Mr. Wallace, and he made things even past doing, horseshoeing and things. He would make like a boat trailer for your, if you had a little boat to take, he would make that. He would fix the kids' bikes and wagons and things for nothing. My stepfather told me that. He said, you go with it, because he was kind of cranky guy. He was always nice to me, but he was cranky. But he'd fix this, I said, hey, Mr. Wallace, my thing, and let me see that, and then he'd fix it. And I said, okay, run along, stay out of trouble, kind of things. So that was he was a nice guy.
So you mentioned your stepfather. He was involved in the business too, wasn't he?
Yes,
The drugstore
and he
business?
grew up in Montavilla, Ed Vanini, and went to Ascension grade school in the church, and he just and Franklin High School, and so he just did a lot of stuff. Grew up very social, very nice guy. He had a lot of brothers and sisters. And all of those that I met and got to know, I just thought were very cool. I think my dad hired him when I was about 9, and because he had just graduated after the GI Bill as a pharmacist at Oregon State, and he said he had worked at Piggly Wiggly. I don't know if you remember that, on 82nd, and he liked the customer service stuff, and he said, but he wanted more than just doing it in a grocery store, and I should be very careful, because good people in any of your stores are good to have, to know. He just said he'd be a pharmacist, and he was very helpful. He and my dad were good friends, and they worked well together for years, and my grandfather. And he would, as time went on later, as TVs and cable television and the ability to record things on videotapes, he would get those that the drug companies would give you, talking about new drugs. He'd give those to the drugstore, and Ed would take them and record over them surgeries that people would have: open heart surgery, knee replacement surgery, hip replacement surgery, and give them to our customers to go and see, to help educate folks, take the fear out of it. And I always thought I worked with nice people. I had nice people in my family and my extended family. I always just thought that was a very cool thing to do.
So, your father passed away in 1966.
Right.
Correct? And what happened to the drugstore at that point?
He had signed it over to my mother, and his words in going into the operating room for pancreatic cancer were, if something happens to me, give Ed a raise. Was knowing how much. Because my brother had not quite been, I don't think he had finished all of his apprenticeship to become a licensed pharmacist. And you can't have a drugstore open without a licensed pharmacist in it. So Ed, bless his heart, and then my aunt, who's a pharmacist, came and worked for a while. And that's what kept it going those few years. And maybe 10 years after that Ed and my mother got married, and they were married longer than my parents were. So so these were all good people, and Ed would always bring laughter to the store, and he was very witty, funny, gentle humor guy. It was, typing up prescription labels, and if people were watching, he'd say, "Notice, at no time do my fingers leave my hand." So those kind,
That's really funny. And so, were you living in Chicago at that time, or were you living here in Portland?
I was, whoa.
In 1966.
Next, because I was in, yeah, I think we moved to Chicago in '64, and then moved back. We moved to Chicago in South Carolina, and moved back in '81.
In 81.
And but I, connected with all of this all the time. I was always, this is where we would land if we were visiting Portland and
Right.
in the Montavilla area. And my friends had tried to come back for class reunions and things and then organized more because I'd been away so long. So it's like, well, let's get some people together and let's do this. And because I haven't seen people, even if it was 10 years ago. So we would do that, and we did the march up from Montavilla to Vestal, and then we had the whole, for a birthday, we got as many community people as possible.
Oh, so that's when they were telling these stories, and they had different
Yes.
versions of the story that you
That's
mentioned earlier.
Right, yes.
Yeah, okay.
It was a beautiful, beautiful fall day. No, it was a cloudy spring day. When I remember, when we walked down Pine Street to 82nd. No, we went over to Burnside, and then we cut over. And they were just laughing. They were all laughing about. They were about the age I am now. They're just things. Okay, and it was fun. It was just, these were wonderfully happy people, happy that they'd gotten education at these schools, and some had gone on and had been teachers, and I've forgotten what all the other things were. They just were good citizens, good people in a community that would help and be part of the activities that were going on and supportive of the kids, and that was just very cool.
So when you came back from Chicago in 1981, did you start working in the drugstore at that point?
Not right away. Somebody's husband had fallen and hurt themselves that had worked at the store. Didn't know her very well because I went in and filled in for her, and then he didn't get that well, and she was just too tired to do that, take care of them and work. It was in the post office because there's a lot of heavy stuff that you do in a post office. And so I did that because I was just going to do that for like 3 weeks, and then, I don't know, 20 years later when I sold the store, I was helping clean out the post office and inventorying all the stamps and things. But it was good. It was a unique experience to live away and then come back and meet people, the parents of your friends that you don't know as an adult when you're growing up, and some of the older people, and the souvenirs were a long time. Vic Souvenir was the person I knew, and his dad apparently had helped remodel my folks' first house to put in some doors. And I know that I asked Vic once about, had he ever heard of Harry Tracy? And he said, oh yeah. And I said, well, I hear people keep looking for his cave. Is it still up there? Harry Tracy rode with the Wild Bunch, and he was a train robber, and a relative. So that's not, And I said, because my dad talked about looking for Tracy's cave, and he said, oh, you know what, when they, on Rocky Butte, the dynamite to make the prison that was out at Rocky Butte, they dynamited the cave away.
Oh, wow.
I said, oh, well, I know a lot of people were up there still looking. Did not know that. I would be glad to pass that on. But that kind of thing. And he would, just every now and then, talking about how things were, some of the older stories with that happened. I think I told you about the Fortners, where he was coming home. He worked for the city and he got paid, and this was in 1900, and he was walking home. The trolley stopped at 69th and Belmont, and he was walking down to about 78th, and did we go by that house? I forgot now what street we were on, like Alder.
Taylor?
Or
one
yeah,
of
it wasn't
those
as far,
streets,
yeah.
south of Stark.
Right, and he got to the corner of 71st and Yam Hill, and there was no street lights. You know, it was dark in December, and a guy came and wanted his money because he knew it had been a payday, and he always had said he'd never give his money to anyone. You know, and he slugged him with his lunchbox, and got down the hill and they called it his wife, and he had been shot, and lived a couple more days, and old family names, if we find that, I'd have to, that old Montavilla names, Willards were one of those, and there was only one phone, and they called the police on the phone, and the policeman had to come out by trolley and then walk down this dark, no sidewalk road on the Yam Hill down to that. And so the family story is that the policeman was a little unhappy about all of that, and then Mr. Fortner did die a couple of days later. Now fast forward in maybe, oh my goodness, it must have been, if it was 1900, at least 2000, maybe 1989. Actually, now I remember, wrong year, but they did the centennial of Montavilla.
Right.
And he came in, the descendant, the grandson of that, told me about that, and he brought in the lunchbox that was dented.
Wow.
And and it was just, you know, the metal thing with a place where you could put just a metal cup on the top to take your lunch. And Hazel Mickelson, who lived in Montavilla, I think her maiden name was Smith, for many, 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 many years. And I mean, she died at the age of 106.
Wow.
So she came in, and I was telling somebody about this, and she was good friends with the guy who had been shot's daughter. And she was always told by her mother never to talk about it. And so she didn't till I was telling someone, and showing the lunchbox, and she said, "I never in my life thought I'd ever see that lunchbox." And you know, here 90 years later, she saw that, and I tried to get her. There were talks about who did it, and Mr. Fortner wouldn't. He said that family has enough trouble. That this is who shot me, but don't tell people. So I don't know how that got resolved. I said, you guys ought to get together. And Hazel, tell me what he said. You know, what'd you come up to? But I wasn't able to maneuver that around. But that was a little bit of exciting crime in old Montavilla.
I'd like to go back to the post office comment. I'm not sure most people know that the Montavilla post office closed down in 1966, and then Dickson Drugs Store became a contract station for the post office, correct?
Right.
And you worked in that, right? So you know what services it provided and so forth.
Right, yeah. It provides almost all of the services. You could register mail, and you could send it with all the different things, special delivery. They had lots of different stamps you could put in. That was available through a regular post office. And if you didn't, you took training, and if you didn't know, there was a help desk that you could call and say, what about this? And so we did a lot of those things for, like, lawyers need a lot of annotated, certified letters and return receipt things,
So you had
packages. And at Christmas, it was just jammed. It would be, you know, up the steps there was an upstairs, and we'd go through the post office, and we'd just stack the packages on the steps till the postman came, and he would just take all this stuff out. But it was, yeah, very, very busy at that time. They opened up a new one up on 100th and Stark, up by...
I think so.
Yeah,
Because up around there, it's not there anymore because it moved again.
And and people were mad at me that I'd run into them, and they said, "Why did you close post office, and I said, well, we didn't have a place to have it. We sold the store. And then I went up to that post office to buy something. I thought, these lines, no wonder people are mad at us. These lines are just awful. And so that was learning a lot in terms of international mail. We had a lot of people who had come from other countries, and learning words for stamp in other languages, in Russian and Chinese and Vietnamese and whatever, the different, like Spanish. There were just a lot of, and it was very fascinating. It was a kind of a fun thing to just meet all these different people who were working so hard. And they would the kids would bring in older brothers and sisters that came in one at a time as they were able to come over to this country and introduce them to us and tell them what they could do here and interpret for the parents or the older siblings or aunts and uncles. That was an interesting life. The pressure on these children who handled it with so much fluency and responsibility was very impressive.
And these were situations that you saw in the drugstore and specifically at the post office counter?
We also were utility pay stations,
Uh-huh.
so we saw those where you pay your light bill or phone bill or water bill.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes when there was confusion.
And you would help them out.
Yeah, explain that.
Mhm.
In fact, one of our gypsy customers, I'd fill out money orders for them, and she was younger, and she just said, Diane, if you teach me to read and write, you wouldn't have to do this for me. And I said, well, come on, I'm working here all day. But I thought that was funny. And it was different things, when you come from a family where literacy was taken for granted, people who needed help in filling out for language or for tradition of not getting educated was something new, which who am I to stand in the way of filling out people's money orders to pay their bills or, whatever it was they're going to do. So, there was always usually an envelope. They just copy all their stuff down there.
So it sounds.
But I just thought that was funny, and I thought there should be. I should probably deal with some of that now that I'm not doing all of that, and just say what resources are there and how can we help? Because that's important. Education is really important. So.
Sounds like Montavilla was sort of a melting pot.
It was.
I mean, from your experience.
Yeah, yes, and it was. It was such a good community in terms of people were involved in everything. People lived in the community. The ministers lived in parsonages or mansions or something, and their kids went to Vestal School, and there was just everybody was. You go to a school play or recital or whatever they were doing, and you'd see your dentist and a doctor and the garbage man, whoever, post office people, I see them. You just see all of that, but they went to the same churches and the same things, and it was a safe feeling. It was. I feel that where your family knew everybody. And they knew you. That was another thing that my dad, somebody recognized me doing something. I wasn't doing anything bad, but probably not something I wasn't supposed to be doing, just checking on. And I just remember my dad said, I was walking by the trolley, the one that came down from Gleason to 80th and stopped in front of where the drugstore was, by that, and somebody started throwing rocks at the trolley. That I was just walking by because I knew better than to do that, but he was the only one that the conductor knew, so he was the only one that got in trouble. He was still mad about that all those years later. So that's probably a downside. There are no secrets in the small community, but That was good. Now I'm rambling. So,
So you remember still the late days of the trolley?
oh yes,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
The little woven things. I remember going on the Mount Tabor one, and to go downtown, you get all dressed up in your patent leather shoes and your things, and sliding as it would go up the hill, sliding down this slick woven. But I'm not sure what this. I've seen it in old streetcars. I just remember that as being very slippery when we would be going up Mount Tabor, and as a kid, trying to hold on to something, I couldn't hold the ups,
Well, you weren't tall enough to hold the strap.
Right?
Yeah.
No, and
I've wondered about that because that trolley, it went up a steep hill coming back also on Yam Hill, and how did they manage those steep hills?
yeah, that is interesting. Yam Hill later, that was a bus route, and you would they would keep that clear and they would sand it always, and but there's still, if you come down Yam Hill towards 76, there's a big fence by the house there, a big barrier thing, because bus crashed into the house once
Where it
years
turns.
ago.
It turns
Well, they
at
just had to
76.
stop.
Yeah,
first
right.
and then they made that little
Right,
cut turn. Yeah.
They just had to jog, right, and then continue on. Did you ever ride on the trolley in the snow?
I don't remember that I did. I
Wonder
don't.
what that might have
I
been
did
like.
the bus. I did because I took the Mount Tabor bus to school, to Washington High School. Yeah. But that was. I think about it a lot in terms of planning. As you get older, you hear about plans for cities, and I think, well, now, how did they plan this? Our church had its centennial, and I worked on that. How did it decide that this place was better than that place? And one of the things I figured out is the place where the Methodist church is now is on very flat land. And it is a class from the Mount Tabor church where the stories of the old timers, they were talking about how everybody would get out and get in their buggies, except for the men that came by horseback, and then they would push the buggies that could be up to their hubs in mud up on Mount Tabor, that volcanic soft dirt mud, and then they would push those out, and then once those all got going, then the gentlemen would get on their horses and ride home. And I thought, well, that's why Montavilla Methodist is down there on the flat land.
Right.
Enough of that. But that was, it really is. When you think about things, you wonder, well, why was that? And then if you find out, it's interesting, and it isn't always as crazy as you think it's going to be. Sometimes it is, but often it's just, this is what we had, this is what we did. So.
I said I wanted to ask you about the Kiwanis Club too, and you talked a little bit about that, and I'm wondering if there are any particular projects other than, you mentioned the camp, for kids.
Well, one of the things that I read in an old issue of the Montavilla was that the first year that they been in existence, they had a food drive, and then the second year they got it twice as much. This was early Depression times when this club started. And right after, was it October in 29? It was right after that it started. And then just different things they did. They went, when Vestal School opened, they planted a hawthorn tree. And then years later when that died, they cut it up in little slices. And somebody typed it up with carbon paper. This tree was planted by the Montavilla Kiwanis Club at Vestal School in honor of it opening up, something like that. But they typed that up for all of these, and then they sealed it up. People would bring them in the drugstore. I've got a couple of them at the house. And I thought, what did I do with those? I was going to save them and give one of them to the Kiwanis International as a thing, but we'll find it. I keep telling her I'll find things.
You've got treasures.
Yes, but then they started the camp for poor kids, and the camp also housed people who were working on the CCC projects at Timberline.
Yes.
And so it was. a place that they could feed people and they could be housed. And that was, and then as kids went there, they started as a day camp and then overnight. And then they started realizing that some of the kids that went there frequently had a little bit more spendable money and than they needed, because they all came for free. Kiwanis raised all the money to send everybody, and the special ed people at Portland State and other Kiwanis said, can't we use this for campers with multiple disabilities? And so that's what it is now. And they take campers that frequently are turned away from other camps and get letters thanking the camp from their parents. Mary Sue learned to tie her shoes. Johnny learned to eat with a fork. Because the counselors are Portland State students, and they have one counselor, one camper, and the college kids are ever so much cooler than anybody's parents about tying shoes and eating with a fork or whatever. So that part's just really good. And it's respite care. One of our members today was pointing out that one of the people, they have to find other places to sleep sometimes because their autistic child is so noisy at night and so just loud. And so when they go to the camp for a week, that's about 5 nights of respite care. That's allowed, and there's places of trust. They get the serious training and screening for all the counselors and the staff to learn how to change diapers and feed people and take care of people who have to be dressed and fed and pottied and the whole thing all day. So it's a good thing, and that's because that's Montavilla. Kiwanis does some good stuff with Dornbecker Children's Hospital and teach training doctors to be doctors, pediatric oncology and hematology specialists, and for kids. And so that's a good thing. That's an important thing. Kiwanis gets involved in some very basic issues through UNICEF. It's just, yes. Did you know the single most prevalent cause for a while, for many years, of mental retardation was the lack of about a nickel's worth of iodine in people's food supplies? And Kiwanis raised money, the iodine deficiency project, and I've learned a lot about salt and how people get it from salt mines, from desalinization, from salt flats, and they would treat it with iodine if it needed to be, and how it changed. They said that schools, by measuring things, that IQs went up by 10% or 10 points. And so it was a very good thing. And then right now we're finishing up maternal and neonatal tetanus project. And that if you can get pregnant mothers and immunize them, then it gives the kids immunization from tetanus. And there's still about 20 countries to go. It started out with much more, but they're trying to get enough of that, the training and supplies to do that for worldwide, so that those particular kids get that immunization that wouldn't otherwise get it. So that's a really good project, actually, and because apparently that tetanus, in the Bible they talk about it, a 7-day thing, and it's so intense that you can't hold your baby and you can't sing to it or do any of the comforting things or pat its back because it's so painful to them. So resolving that is a very big deal.
And I have to also mention that they spearheaded getting the branch library in Montavilla back in 1934.
That's right.
Which was amazing, that, the heart of the Depression.
Well, they actually, I've read this in one of their newsletters on the only depression we need to be concerned about is this mark you leave when you're walking on the beach.
That's a good one.
And that kind of attitude.
Yeah.
No, we can, I'm amazed at what people can do when they say, let's do that. The high school kids on this IDD thing will raise just phenomenal amounts of money through their car washes and bake sales and all the different, I mean, really lots of money. And I'm just so blown away by these kids that just say, no, nobody has to do that. There's a sign project that is surgically implanted nails, they call them, that go in the big bones in the arms and the leg. In developing countries, they're not good roads, but there are a lot of motorcycles. And there's a lot of, and then water buffalo, they'll step on you or something, you know. So there's these major bones get broken. And then if you're the father, you're the breadwinner. And if they have to put it in traction, it takes maybe 18 months to heal. So by these nails that they put in the big bone, and that heals in like within a week, maybe less. And they don't have x-rays, so you have this for the legs, you squat and grin. And if you can do that after you've had the surgery, and then you can walk out, they walk home. And then that means kids stay in school instead of, going to work and support the family, because they can still do that. It's very cool. It's very cool stuff to do that. That's just ongoing, but this, and the motorcycles and motorized bikes and things that go at a speed on unimproved roads and uncontrolled traffic, traffic plans they told the story of a mother just was so grateful for one of the kids that was saved. And she says, I've lost 3 kids to the motorcycles. And so this is real. And then these little key clubbers in high school just march to that and say, all right. And it's about $100, it's a little bit more now, to do the whole thing. And they train local nurses and local doctors how to do it. And they get the equipment to them, so you're providing a higher standard of health care, and people are learning how to do things of this type of surgery, and probably more if you're in a hospital setting. It's very exciting. It's just very exciting.
What country is this program?
This is all over.
Okay.
They have it in Africa and in India, and I think a couple places in South America. I'd have to look at a map. I haven't looked at that map recently. Because I have a conference coming up that I will be going in. That's certainly one of my interests, that I would do that. And I will show you. I will get you that literature, because you might want to do a program on this. This is very good. Yes, not wanting to be pushy, but
Right.
That's how you get things done.
yeah. Well, this is. Sometimes I just feel if you can make enough connections, it's amazing what people. I'm going to tell you why. Before AIDS took over so badly and really caused a change in our things, years ago we had a member of our church who had twin daughters who had sickle cell anemia, and getting blood transfusions for them, but she just said, all the time I'm asking for blood transfusions. And I said to myself, Lent is coming up, and I'm just crap about giving stuff up for Lent, because that's not Methodist tradition particularly. But I am going to do something, and I will try to get, for every 40 days of Lent, somebody to go down and donate blood in this woman's name for her twin daughters. So I said, I can call Methodist ministers. They're different. I can do 40. I know. So I talked to a minister, called us at the house, and I said, hi, and I'm his wife, actually, and I would like to tell you this. He said, well, let me ask a few more questions. Next thing I know, he's involved in the ministry to the prisons. They don't have the AIDS virus out there so much, so the prisoners could give blood to donate blood for the cause. So my memory is it was like 300 pints of blood went into Mrs. Brandon's family, for her twin daughters. And so she comes up to me really humbly and she says, this is so nice. She says, would you mind, I've become friends with another mother who has twin sons who are hemophiliacs. Could I split this with her? Well, yes, it's yours, and I'm sitting there. She's thinking I'm this big hero, and all I did was run my mouth. That, you know, but isn't, that's, I believe in that. I talk too much, but I still am going to run my mouth because good things happen.
Those are good stories.
Yeah, right.
Are there other stories, thinking back, outside of the Kiwanis, but in the Montavilla community, similar things that you can remember, efforts that people made and really accomplished something that was very useful and productive?
You know, some of the, I don't know what was, because all the business people, a lot of them belong to Kiwanis, but along Stark Street with the big windows, they would have Christmas murals in the windows that they sponsored at Vestal School, and different classes would do this, and all the businesses would have drawings of snowmen and Santa Claus and whatever they decided to do. I always thought that that was kind of a cool thing. And I know that the PTA, I guess it was, raised the money for the safety guards, safe crossing school people, for the stops, flags, and the little cross, whatever you call those things that you wear, the pageant, not a pageant ribbon, but and I remember those guys were do it right across the street from the drugstore, help people across Stark, and then that was the end of the line of the people who went south from Vestal, and just that kind of thing, that we can do this and we can raise money for this, raise money for that, and it was very exciting, some of that. I guess I think part of that just grew up. But I'm still blown away when I see people get together and they raise great gobs of money for a very worthy cause. And sometimes people say, I just don't want to flip any more pancakes. I don't, there's all these fundraisers. But then you look at what that fundraiser can do, and that's scholarships or playground equipment, or to send to the foundations of the international collective thing like Kiwanis to build up after a flood or a hurricane, to donate to some area and take care of stuff. That's a really awesome thing to be part of, and I am very happy to be part of that, and I need to help more people be part of it too. Want to join Kiwanis?
There's the pitch, right?
But it makes you feel good.
Yeah. Well, it makes you feel hopeful and not despairing, and that's a good thing. So yeah, I think I must have shared. Sometimes I talk too much.
That's okay. This is a long form interview.
Right. That's the point, yeah.
I do another topic. It's a different topic, but one I haven't heard you talk about very much. But you said your father, I think it was your father, was really interested in photography. And I'm interested in that because my grandfather was a photographer and lived in the same area.
Yeah. I would somewhere. There's a big picture. I'm hoping they're all the Historical Society. I've got to trace them down. But of this corner of 71st and Yam Hill, the name is on it. My father wrote it in a black marker on the picture itself, and blew it up. And my brother and I put up a whole bunch of pictures. And the guy's son came in, and I said, "Oh yeah," and he says, "Yeah, my dad did all of that. He did it on glass plates." And he says, "I've looked so much hard for those, and I've never been able to find them." I said, "That would be really exciting." He said, "Yeah, you see that scratch?" Now, I had just taken photography, so I could fix that. I could take that big scratch right across the painting. He says, "Yeah, I got in so much trouble for scratching the plate that made that mark. Well, now it's history. Can't fix that." But you just think that this guy took so many pictures.
Your father.
I think he may have inspired my father.
Oh,
my father, did the. They had the Montavilla Photography Club, but I found some cards of my dad saying, he'd do wedding photography and different things. William Z. Dixon, and young married guy. I got to raise some more money, and the drugstore was still now supporting more family, than just my father, you know, my grandfather and grandmother, but, you know, my father and my mother. And yeah, he did. He liked to take. I've got some nice art photos that he took that are kind of nice.
Mm-hmm.
And
We should compare photos.
yeah, no, that'd be fun.
My grandfather, who lived on 68th up on Mount Tabor,
Oh, really?
he had his own little studio in the basement. He'd take photographs, and then
Wow.
periodically neighbors would ask him to show his photographs. So he'd show little exhibitions of his
Yeah.
photographs
Oh, bless
in his
his
home.
heart. Yeah.
And some of them are of Mount Tabor, and
How awesome! Do you still have those?
I do. I've got a whole photograph album.
Well, let's talk
that he
sometime.
he put
Yeah.
together, and he did this beautiful copper plate handwriting, so that you can see
isn't that
each
wonderful?
photograph is titled.
Wow.
And I have his old camera, the kind with the bellows, and I've got
yeah,
the glass
yeah,
plates.
I've got those of my grandmother's. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
know
got
glass
everything.
plates. Wow, that's
Yeah.
yeah. When I watched the Civil War thing, that Ken Burns thing, they talked about how so many of the glass plates went into building greenhouses and other things and just faded away. And I think, how much do we need to keep? But boy, I hate to see some of that stuff going out of our lives and our consciousness of how things were.
Right.
I do. Old movies, on Turner Classic Movies sometimes, where you just see the rural stuff. I mean, I remember this down on the Umpqua River where my mother's family settled. You know, the old fences, the pumps, the old wagons, the old wagon wheels and things. And I thought, yeah, I remember that. That was just what we did when we went down to visit those relatives.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's very interesting, isn't it? And I hate to see this stuff. I hate to see this stuff go out of our consciousness. You ask a child told me the other day she was named Marissa. Oh, I said after Anne of Green Gables' mother, foster mother. She said, who? No. My girl said that when somebody said they didn't know who Justin Timberlake was. Wait, what? But how do you know what's worth saving? But you never know. In reading the things, all of a sudden you see something else and you say, oh, that could be what had happened, you know, that this other interpretation. You know, no wonder they're so mad at each other. You know, this has been going on for so long. I just reading things about the start of World War I, and I thought, I did not know that. But I just said, oh, this is really entrenched. Oh, no wonder this is still going on today in that whole Serbia area. Wow.
Right.
Yeah. So that's, and then living in the South, coming from the land of Lincoln, living in Charleston, home of Fort Sumter, sometimes versions of the Civil War became a little different than what your kids were learning in Chicago schools and South Carolina schools. And my one older daughter came home one day and she just so her little Yankee heart was just very offended. And he kept saying, the Yankee carpetbaggers this and the Yankee carpetbaggers that. And just, and she said, yeah, but y'all lost the war. Valerie, that is disrespectful. South really has a lot of, you know, the show of respect, you know. And she said, and I said, besides, Yankees don't say y'all. You know, you have to.
There's the victory.
Yeah.
Gotcha saying y'all.
But that's still some of that. I'm amazed at how so much some of that anger is still going on and coming back and regrowing and
It's true.
and just multiplying like fungus sometimes. That anger and hatred is just not good. But you got to give her credit for sticking up for what she thought was right. Yeah. So that's, I don't know what else to add on that. Unless you want the whole history of some of the Chicago stuff in the 60s on the south side. It has nothing to do with Montavilla.
Well, I have a question. What is your first Montavilla memory?
Wow. I have pictures of me at my first Christmas at my grandmother's house, but I was maybe 2 weeks old. But the difference between December 12th and December 25th. But I don't have a lot of personal memories. Just family, I think, around me a lot. And then the walks. We would walk a lot. We would walk up to Mount Tabor. And I remember my mother said, she said when Barnaby was born, he was 2.5 years younger than I was. It was like there were 3 adults and the baby, and I was, 2.5. So I did get more awareness, I think, than sometimes that people, because they would just talk to me like I was the other adult there and explain things to me, which was cool. But I remember at one point actually realizing that somebody that looked very familiar was indeed a relative, and not just somebody that I saw all the time in the drugstore. Mm-hmm. We had a fountain. People would come in and get something, a treat or something, or cigarettes. There are those things that you'd see people all the time, and it would be familiar. I used to hate it that people knew more about my life than I did sometimes. But they'd be talking to my folks and oh yeah, we're going to do this. Oh, I hear you're going to do that. No, I didn't know that. So then, Dad, Mom.
I didn't tell you.
Yeah, I don't want to hear from everybody else what I'm doing on vacation. Come on. But it's hard. I do remember thinking that one of my earliest memories that in my memory bank was of the reeds on Butler Creek off the Umpqua River, going down to see some of my mother's family that we could only get to by boat, and just going and seeing these wave in the waters in the wake of the boat. And I do have that memory. Probably at the drugstore. I don't know what I remember and what's been told to me.
That happens, yeah.
Emmy Lou was very impressed, though, the fact that I was very young and knew all the words to Dance with a Dolly with a Hole in Her Stocking.
Emmy Lou Johnson, who lives, well, she did live in Montavilla. I'm not sure she's still there now, but she says she was a soda jerk.
Yes.
In the drugstore. And I don't know if you knew about this, but she told me that she used to give her friends extra ice cream. It's finally out.
So did I. Yeah. I used to think those girls that worked at the fountain, and as well, if they were young women, that they were in high school, and I was just sure I still haven't achieved that level of sophistication that I attributed to these gals.
Right.
And we went from the fountain that I remember as the old fountain, where you sat here and then the counter was there, and the ice cream things that you scooped out of were behind it, so they were, I hope I'm not doing this well for radio, am I? But there was a counter between where the people sat and where the people worked. And then we changed that, and we had the counter where people sat and had their drinks, and you turned around and you got your ice cream from a freezer behind that. So, and one of the girls saying, I was quite young and kind of shocked, but I just thought, I could never say that. And she said, I'm going to like that. So when you're scooping up an ice cream cone, people can't see right down to your navel. Can't believe somebody said that out loud. Oh my goodness. But that was, that was in people remembering getting their ice cream there forever. And I just thought it was a big loss. I still think that that's a big loss.
The
That-
neighborhood drugstore, or
Yeah,
soda
yeah.
fountain.
Yeah.
Where did the ice cream come from?
Arden's Ice Cream.
Oh.
Yeah, that was our, yeah. And they had the thing on Belmont, I think, the Arden's Dairy Ice Cream. But yeah, signs there, Arden's Ice Cream, and we had brick and bulk. And brick was you just buy a pint or a quart out of the freezer that was there, and then bulk was where you would hand pack it. That's where people put in the extra ice cream.
Oh.
And then we were taught to put that ice cream in and put it up. Don't fill it all the way, because then you take it down, because it's not going to weigh a whole whatever the pint was or the quart was. And it's not going to weigh, so then you take it down and you put the ice cream, then you fill it up with that, because people would rather see you put the ice cream in than take any out to make the weight right.
Oh,
So that was,
good psychology.
yes, a little salesmanship there. And, but then if it was your friend, you got a little bit more.
Jammed it down.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it was, yeah. That was fun.
Well, I remember from back in those days when you could go to a soda fountain and you could have the Cokes made up. They'd put different flavors in.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah. Had cherry, lemon, and fresh lemon. We kept fresh lemon in to put in, and vanilla and chocolate. I never thought of chocolate Coke.
A bit strange.
Yeah, but yeah. Fresh lemon Coke was good, and then all that. But you could also make some people like the chocolate, just a chocolate drink, and they would make the sodas that you'd mash up and your carbonation thing, you push it one way and it would be a solid, hard stream, then you pull it the other way and it would be just running water.
Oh.
And so with the soda, you did it so it would mix up all that flavoring and that little scoop of ice cream at the bottom that made it a little more creamier. But in a float, then you just made it, and then you put the ice cream in the top. And then after you've mopped up for many, many times, when people go like this with their straws, you put the straw in for them, then give them the fork, and then you put your towel right there so you can mop it up, so people wouldn't, because the ice cream and this carbonation would just go all over everything. And yeah, that was that. And we had sundaes, and then pineapple sundae, caramel sundaes, or was it butterscotch? Oh, I can't remember that. It seemed like we had both, and all the different, there were the ladles, and then a hot fudge in a special container, and a strawberry sundae, which was, yes, it was strawberry preserves. That back in the day, you didn't have fresh strawberries all year round. Come on, don't be getting on my case about that. And sundaes were 50 cents, and then you get whipped cream. For an extra nickel, you could get nuts. And then the cherry was kind of just on the top. And
As they say.
that was. And in the summer, that was hard work too. I have to say, especially in the summer, during some of the holidays where people would just come in for special treats. You scrambled just because you had to wash all the dishes by hand, and it had to go through a sanitation process that the health department decreed, which is good, But there were rules, and you had to keep on top of that. That was good. When I look back, I'm happy I had that life.
Mm-hmm. Did people come there after seeing movies at the Academy?
Not too much the Academy, but the older theaters. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. But my grandfather would open up and make ice cream. The old hand crank things, and have the thing, I can't visualize how that was, because this was before. Mrs. Mickelson, whom I told you lived to a ripe old age, told me that that was the way her and her husband courted, is that they would go to the movie that was up in, at that time, the old Lewis building. It's where Chamberlain Insurance is now. There's a big room upstairs that they would do theater and a ballroom, and I'm not sure all of that, but they would come down from that and they would sit in those sweetheart chairs and little tables, and they would do their courting at Dickson's after the movies, and that's how that worked out, and that what a sweet story, you know, really.
Mm-hmm.
And so, and I don't know how long that part went on. I remember Ed saying that I don't know how Grandpa did it, because that was just.
Means so many different things that he had to do. in the store.
Well, he said, yeah, and then he had the house, and when did he mow the lawn, and when did he, the housework and stuff. And then I heard so many women say, I used to keep house for your grandmother. I thought, well, that doesn't sound like, but my grandmother was a seamstress, the number of people when I came back that said, and your grandmother did this, and she made our dresses, my bridal wedding dress, and then she sang at our wedding.
Oh my goodness.
So that's, and somebody said that with my parents' wedding, they saw these flowers at the front of not a real big church, but the Methodist church was a smaller, and they saw the snowball flowers, and I don't know that they have tree. I haven't seen a snowball tree for eons. And then vine maple, and my dad's good friend, somebody that had up the street, blacksmith house, Mrs. Stewart had a snowball tree and offered those to my parents. They got married in May, and then their friend went up and cut a whole bunch of fine maple up the gorge, and then made this lovely arrangement. And someone said, "Oh wow, our folks didn't have money like that." I thought, well, I don't, my folks didn't have that much either in '38, and this was all donated. This was all just people being creative and imaginative about making a beautiful place. And that's what gives me. I'm not one of the people that can always do the beautiful thing. I appreciate it, but I always think about it, and I'm just not good at that. But I love people who can be just festive with what they've got and just make it a lovely experience and bring happiness and joy to folks. I think that's very cool. So, yes, anyway.
I think you told me about various old photographs and different photographs of different things that you used to put up in the store. Am I remembering that
You are
right?
correct, yes, and there's a CD with all those on it. I'm entitled to a copy of it, and I just have to follow through on it. But my brother and I started blowing it up into poster size. Barnaby really started it more, but he had to stay in the pharmacy, and my knees were good, and so we'd get them laid out, and I would do it and label them of who they were. But people loved them. There was a lot of hostility when we closed the store. Well, what's going to happen to those pictures? Who's going to, hey, my dad and his friends took a lot of those pictures, and we framed them. So, you don't get to have an edit. No, I didn't say that, but there was a lot of attitude about an ownership of these. But we like these pictures of our neighborhood, and I need to find them. I've had a couple of rounds of bad health, so I have lost track, and I have to just get on the phone and see what I can do. Because I think that would be a good Kiwanis program and a good just community program to say if you want to see the old pictures. Because there are a lot of people who still talk to me about that.
They were old pictures of streets, houses, people.
Yeah, the old For Jim Bridger, the school that was there before Jim Bridger. Why can't I think of that name?
You told me.
Yeah, Hudson, the old Hudson School. We have a picture of that, and then we have the old Montavilla School. I don't think we have a big blown up one of the World War I garden, victory gardens that they had at the Montavilla School. Let me see. We had the corners of at this corner here, at 80th and Stark, of this building that we got the building from Mr. Shufflesbarger, and then this is this, I wish somebody who knows cars would know that this was probably very late 40s, early 50s, I'm thinking, and so that we rented apartments up here on the second floor. There were apartments, and I felt very sad that we took the bay windows out. But my mother said they leaked a lot.
But were they apartments when you were here?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if they stopped using them as
no,
apartments.
not until we remodeled about 1961, and they were willing to put the apartments back, but the city said, no, you have to have parking for it. These were all single-room occupancy ones of veterans and other people who didn't have a lot of resources and lived alone, and they were kind of our family thing, that who lived up there. My grandmother, one of my grandmothers, and a great aunt lived up there when they needed a space to live. But it was a down the hall bathroom. A couple of the building rooms were quite large, but they said we had to have parking, and we don't. There's no place for parking, and so then they just didn't use it. That's a shame. That's a lot of space. And then as the housing was getting tough, the city called and said, well, can't you put some apartments up there? And my mother was then probably close to the age I am now, maybe not quite as old, but she wasn't not that place in her life where she was going to do a major remodeling and do all of that. And I said, I'm sorry, you guys have to take a little. We don't care about the parking anymore.
No.
Well, but who's going to do it? I don't own the building. I've got a chip on my shoulder about you saying that when they were willing to do that, and I just sometimes have people that take city planning courses then don't always look at, well, where are the people that are going to make these changes, and what are their resources, and what are their dreams for this piece of property that they've purchased, and what do they want to do with it? And maybe it's good and maybe it's not so good. I don't know all of the things, but sometimes the diploma or the certificate that you've completed urban planning takes precedent over people's own dreams that they've taken out mortgages on and are paying the property taxes on. I just feel like some dialogue and respect is called for on all of that. And so they start, 29, look at that. Oh, crosswalk. And I remember being so, when I figured crosswalk with the X, because later on, but I remember being, when I figured that out. That was after, quite a bit after 1929. But
So we're looking at a photograph of Stark Street with Dickson Drugs Co on the corner there, and some old cars and Mount Tabor in the background.
let me just look here. Oh, sorry. I think there's the ice. I think Mr. Giles' ice thing should still be right up in. One of these is a bakery that still has the big thick walls. This is where the hardware store was, right here.
On Spa Hardware?
Yeah, and Spa's Hardware. And I'd have to look at it. I think that's Callahan's Meat. There were different meat markets around. oh, it's very interesting. This was the old Lewis building. This is where there was old movies up there. I know
Oh.
Leander Lewis owned this building, but there was this one, another Lewis building. And it's the iteration of dreams, and the big staple of kids that grew up in Montavilla would be Roy's Five and Dime.
Mm-hmm.
And after the war, when people were starting to get settled and build up things, and he had across the street from the drugstore where I showed you the old post office was today,
Mhm.
that he had a 5 and dime store. Then he built a building, and Mrs. Schaffstall told me that his wife, that Harry Laird knew about who was a Kiwanian, about federal loans and federal things to get businesses and all started to build buildings to stimulate the economy after the war. And so that's when they built it's on the, I don't know what it is now. It's a bunch of businesses. Things were easier when just one business bought out another, and then you could just say one thing. But on the north side of Stark, not to the corner, but it was a big building, and and Mr. Roy, Mr. Schaffstall would sit up, and he could see he could look down from a thing and see if kids were shoplifting and things. And I heard that, and I thought, well, that would be wrong to do, one, to steal, and two, really stupid when you can look up there and see him looking down at you. Yeah, sometimes a little cynical, but that was a big deal. And I remember getting presents for my brothers there, and
Yeah.
they just had more than a 5 and dime, more than a nickel and a dime, but it was where you could get,
Inexpensive.
yeah, or glasses. You break glasses and you have a family and lots of milk. You could go up there and buy a little set of glasses for an affordable amount and just give them to your mom for Mother's Day. I mean, it just made you feel really, really proud. So that was a big deal. And on this side,
Before you go on, where was that in Roy's Five and Dime in relationship to Dickson Drugs Co? Was it?
First it was right across here,
Okay.
and then secondly it was up here,
Okay.
past where the old bank building,
So
where Yahala is now. Yeah.
okay, so first it was off to the west, and then it was close to Yahala.
Just
Just-
east of Yahala.
just east
yeah,
of
this
Yahala.
this is south. It was just right across the
Mhm.
street from
Mhm.
here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And
So you were going to talk about another place on Stark, I think. We could talk
Yeah.
about what was at Yahala, the
that was the old bank.
Antini's drugs.
Antini's, yeah. Yeah.
Department store at one point.
Yes.
Right.
And then Teeny owned a bunch of property there.
Mm-hmm.
Was very supportive in the community and in youth activities for his church, which was a Syrian Orthodox. I've forgotten now exactly, but he was very supportive of the community in general. It was and then was one of the partners, I think, or in the academy.
Oh. Well, it's his building, I think. I think that he constructed the building.
That could be, and then he owned this building across the street where the department store was.
Oh, the
And Miss Chuck
Montavilla.
Shar took that over later.
That was the
and-
Montavilla department store.
Mhm. And a lot of these places you see when you've gone to older parts of cities. And I know when we moved to Somerville, South Carolina, it was an old southern city, but it had a lot of the same commercial things of a main street of a small town that I identified with. I said, oh, yeah, I remember this kind of place and that kind of place. And that was it. It was just interesting. It's not anything. But yeah, and I'm sorry that we don't walk so much. I just, walking up to run an errand to the bank or to another, deliver medicine on one of the places, that going by and waving at the people who are, just.
And you knew them.
I knew them.
You
Yeah,
knew them.
yeah, and they knew me. So and the point being is that sometimes my great, wonderful, law-abiding behavior was a matter of don't mess up because everybody will know about it. And I didn't have great desires to do things, but it was, you don't want to embarrass your family because they wouldn't stand for it. Yeah. But it was nice. It was just there are times when you just wish you weren't, everybody didn't know you and that everybody didn't know all the stuff about your life. And then there were other times when there's such a security feeling. Occasionally there were cranky people that would be hard to get along with. And I remember one, I almost started crying in the drugstore. My mother collared me and just brought me back in the back room. She says, "Don't ever let that man see you cry. He's just mean. But don't let him see you cry." Okay. Okay. But that, and then there are people who were cranky because they had bad health or somebody they loved had bad health. And you think before really good wheelchairs. We had one really old one that we would rent out for a while, and as I got older I started realizing, okay, this is hard. This, just that straight back and the wheels and little wheels so you couldn't go over things easily. And not scientifically engineered where you could back up and go up and take them up a curb or something. And I do remember going down Gleason to work and turning down 80th and seeing one of our customers going down in her power wheelchair down the middle of 80th. I pulled up and, "Bonnie, what are you doing in the middle of the street?" She says, "There are no curb cuts between here and Stark."
Oh, no.
Yeah. And you just think, wow, we have made progress. But there's still a lot of places. I still would hear about places that you can't get into if you're in a wheelchair. You can't get up no elevator. And we've got a long ways to go on making that all the stuff accessible. And as someone people would be cheerfully yelling at, I remember one guy was in a wheelchair and was just so unhappy. I said, "Well, there's that driveway." He says, "But there should be a place right in front of Dixon's." I don't make those plans. So I was very glad when they did put the curb cuts in for wheelchairs and accessibility, and people with pushing strollers and stuff. Yeah, they to just get across the street safely. And so that was a good thing. And I still was in another drugstore, an old-timey drugstore over on Sandy, and I got my prescription and was walking out, saw a guy trying to get it. He was in a wheelchair. Independent drugstore kid, run up there. "Here, let me get that door for you, sir," and let him in, because that's what you need to do, and that's hard. It's just hard. I don't think people should be stressed on that. So I don't know what the other changes that I've seen. Curb cuts is a life changer for so many people. At each corner at least.
Definitely. I have a question.
Yeah.
Besides ice cream, what was another big seller at the drugstore, like drug-wise? I'm just curious about medicine back in the day.
I remember my dad, he used to buy Bayer aspirin, acetylsalicylate, something acid, acetylsalicylic acid. And my dad was telling me about generic things. As long as they have the same name, you can't find acetylsalicylic acid. Is now the name is Bayer aspirin, and just aspirin in general. So that's one of the changes. My folks wrote me once that there was a head lice outbreak at one of the schools, and they were the only ones because we used to have it by the barrel that had the stuff you could put in your hair for head lice. During a drug meth thing, people wanted to buy Sudafed. Was that the one that had methamphetamines?
Yeah.
Yeah, Sudafed, yeah. And they tried to buy it by the case. Well, by this time I was totally an adult to say, no. You're trying to compete with us? What is that? Because they would always seem very clever, and they would ask for a specific, wanting to buy it by the case of a generic one made here in Portland. And I just thought, people get addicted to stuff, and it destroys a lot of lives and hurts a lot of people. And we had a methadone outlet there for a while if it was heroin. We sold sharps by the eaches, because there were a lot of the places, the big businesses would sell them only by $1 for a diabetic. Well, the Oregon Retail Druggist Association made an agreement that they would sell them by eaches in individuals because of all of the disease from needle sharing that were passing. And it did affect Oregon's AIDS rate. It went down. And that was a very good thing. But while you're still selling those things, you become aware of folks who are having struggles, and some more nobly than others, and some just saying, I like being high. They would tell me that. If I could just be a place where I could be high all the time, I'd be happy. And I have no answer for that. That's not something I can envision wanting to do with someone's life. But then having somebody stand up in the Montavilla Methodist Church during asking for prayers and things. My granddaughter is 3. She stepped off a curb and was stabbed by a needle that was just left in the gutter, and now she has to undergo all these tests for, and so then I become, a warrior on that regard. I said, okay, that's just not right. And all the addicts understood that. And I pulled out a sharps container and I set it down. I said, it's right behind her. You ask anyone and dispose of your needles in here. Do not bury them. And people came in and they buried them, and I went out and got new things. I said, I'm not going to touch that. They've been buried in just mud and disgust and these needles, but they did clean up the neighborhood a bit, I guess, getting all of that out. But, when you're minister, you're parking and you're walking by, and he's going down into the stairways and things at the entrance of the church, and to start the day before Vacation Bible School starts, to get the needles out of there where addicts have gone down and shut up. I did become a kind of a big mouth about here, and then I kept that up, and people would look and they come back in and say, well, here I have these needles too, and they would put them in the container, but I don't think it made a big dent. But I did think of one. You used to have to sign a book if things had codeine in it, and cough syrup did. And that was one of the things that sometimes people would buy more than they should. Mm-hmm. And I found one of them, actually. I'll try and save all that, and I don't know how much of that I'm supposed to keep confidential, because I recognize the names in them. Mm-hmm. And I would recognize the frequency of some of the names. And I think, okay, I remember this guy, and he was in here all the time buying something with codeine in it. And I think that the search for escaping from from your life, with better living through chemistry, as we would say.
Right.
Has been with us a long time, and I don't know what the answer is. I don't know. There are people who are in chronic pain, who are on chronic painkillers that are not necessarily addictive, but you don't want to deny people relief from serious pains forever, whatever that is. And there's a lot of work that needs to be done in studying that and dealing with that. And I think of that in terms of with the veterans sometimes that come home and the anger that they must have, and I understand that. But I don't know. Sometimes that pain defeats their lives and making wise decisions, and it's hard. It's hard on the families. I will tell you another thing. I'm sorry, running on. But a friend of mine, father of a friend of mine that I grew up with, was telling me that his stepson, had this very rare cancer, and was at one point they did that I don't know, where you take your own blood and you treat it and you make it all and then you put it back in, and as a cure. They tried that, and that his son had AIDS, and I look at him. He said he's hemophiliac, and hemophiliacs are dying throughout this whole county that I know of because people with AIDS, unbeknownst, this is not an evil plot. I don't believe, would donate blood because they would say we need blood, and folks would go down and donate, and they had AIDS, and this was before we discovered that was a way, and the son had hemophilia and needed all the transfusions, and then at the one time, then his father's cancer was kicking in and his AIDS was kicking in, and the poor wife / mother was there just dealing with monumental pain. And it just seems like we need to be teaching and learning more about these issues. And another friend's son died of AIDS because he was a hemophiliac. And I was talking to his brother and somebody else, a very good and devout person, sorry. And and I said I was glad that the father of this kid has spoken up about the issue of AIDS and thanking people for their in Kiwanis. It was a Kiwanis thing, the outpouring of love and support that Kiwanians gave him when he was going through this unbelievable pain. And the other friend, whom I know to be a good and caring man, said you would just think that people would learn that would do that. And the uncle and I both said he was a hemophiliac. He got it through blood transfusions, and that this had not occurred to our third friend. But the educational need, the learning curve is so great for people to just live knowledgeably and humanely with each other is just important. It's just important. And I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you spread that word, but I think that's important.
But I think you are doing it. I mean, you're talking about the Kiwanis work.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't solve the whole problem, but it is a way of educating people.
Yeah.
To be helpful.
Yes. Counselors from the camp write back and say, I did not know what it was like to be, I did not know anybody in a wheelchair. I did not know anyone who couldn't speak, who could only communicate through signing. I did not know people could have so many physical difficulties about eating or dressing, and it changes their lives and their outlooks. It's just a wonderful thing, just a wonderful thing. I'm a big believer in that. And in the drugstore, you do hear and you watch and wait with people who are going through awful things.
Mm-hmm.
And just sometimes listen and smile and be glad to see them when they come in, and just be a source of joy if you can. Sometimes it's hard.
That's true.
So now that I've bent your ears, is there...
Do you have anything else?
I don't.
Okay. Well, this has been interesting and a lot of fun. Thank you both for your work, and yeah, I'd love to see those photos, and I think everybody in Montavilla and East Portland would love to see those historic photos if we can get them together.
I think some of them are in the Historical Society. I'm
Okay.
not sure, but...
All right, we'll wrap it up here. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
A quiet neighborhood street in East Portland. Each house, each business, each organization has its own unique life, its own unique story. And even with the ability to reach the entire world in their pockets, many neighbors are choosing to focus their time and energy where they can have the most impact, their nearby community, their neighborhood. They're supporting neighborhood businesses and services, they're learning about their schools and community organizations, they're finding ways to get involved and take action. Village Portland was founded to spotlight localism and celebrate this important kind of community service. It's your village, let's explore it together.